Story 1. It was a typical Friday night shift at Pizza Palace for me and my friends Alex and Zoe. We were the closing crew, working the counter and prepping pizzas until close at 1 a.m. I had just gotten back from my dinner break around 11:30 p.m. Alex was finishing up a delivery while Zoe was on her 30-minute break. Since it was the end of the night, I figured I'd get a head start on cleaning the front counter area. About 10 minutes into wiping down tables, the phone rang. I picked it up with our usual greeting. "Thank you for calling Pizza Palace. This is Matt speaking. How may I help you this evening?" On the other end was an older sounding man asking if we were still delivering pizzas. I replied, "Yes sir, we are still taking orders until midnight as long as they aren't too large." The man said no problem and proceeded to order a medium supreme pizza for delivery. He gave me an address that was about 15 minutes away on the outskirts of town. I told him it would be around 30 minutes for delivery and thanked him for his order. Once the pizza was out of the oven, I boxed it up, grabbed some Parmesan pepper packets and headed out to my car. As I drove to the address given, I turned on the radio and hummed along to some upbeat pop songs. About halfway to my destination, I came up behind a car at a stop sign on a dark country road. The car just sat there, not moving at all. After waiting almost a full minute, I gently honked to get their attention. Still no movement. Finally, I decided to go around the car, slowly pulling into the oncoming lane. But just as I did, the other car suddenly lurched forward and continued down the road. I was a little annoyed, but figured maybe they were distracted by something. A couple minutes later, though, I passed that same car, pulled off on the side of the road, all its lights off. A weird, uneasy feeling came over me, but I tried to shake it off. Still, I kept checking my rearview mirror periodically to make sure I wasn't being followed. Eventually, I turned down a long, narrow driveway leading to the delivery address. Trees and overgrown bushes lined each side. I pulled up to the modest ranch-style home and double-checked I had everything before going to knock on the front door. After a minute or so, an elderly lady answered looking confused. I told her I was here to deliver the pizza ordered to this address. She apologized but said no one at this house ordered pizza tonight. I thanked her for letting me know and headed back to my car. Wrong addresses happen sometimes, so I wasn't too surprised. I figured I'd call the store and have my co-workers call back the number to confirm. But as I started slowly driving back down the dark wooded driveway, two bright headlights suddenly blinded me from ahead. I shielded my eyes straining to see but couldn't make anything out. The headlights stayed glaring straight at me, unmoving. I waited for the car to pass me or turn around, but it just sat there. With the driveway being so narrow, there was no room for me to go around. I debated trying to back out, but didn't want to risk getting stuck or damaging my car on the rocky, unkempt driveway. So I just continued waiting, hoping the other driver would make the first move. After what seemed like forever, the piercing headlights suddenly shut off, leaving me in total darkness temporarily. As my eyes adjusted, I could just make out the outline of the vehicle sitting in the middle of the path ahead. To my dismay, I realized it was the same car from earlier that was stopped at the intersection. My heart started racing as I tried to figure out why they would follow me all the way out here. Were they playing some kind of prank, or was there something more sinister going on? I sat there frozen for a few moments, afraid to move. The car just sat there too, completely dark and silent. Finally, I slowly creeped forward, past the parked car, staying as far away as possible. Just as I was almost clear of the other vehicle, the driver's door suddenly swung open. A man got out and started briskly walking toward me. I stopped, unsure what to do. The man stopped about halfway between our cars and started waving me over to him frantically. Every fiber of my being was telling me not to stop, to just floor it past this guy. But there was something about the way he was waving and walking that made me feel like maybe he actually did need help. Against my better judgment, I slowly inched my car forward next to him and rolled down the window. The man didn't say anything at first. He just walked around to the back of my car, staring at my trunk intently. My anxiety heightened as I watched him in the rearview mirror. Just then I noticed the doors of his car all opening, and 3 other men jumping out. My blood ran cold. I slammed the car into drive and hit the gas, speeding down the narrow driveway, swerving around trees and bushes. I heard shouts behind me as I fishtailed onto the main road, the men's car chasing after me within seconds. My heart pounded as I sped recklessly through the dark, wooded backroads. The car stayed right on my tail, flashing their brights trying to get me to pull over, but I kept my foot on the gas pedal, taking random turns in hopes of losing them. Finally, after what felt like forever, the car behind me screeched off down a side street. I sped all the way back to Pizza Palace and burst into the empty shop breathless. My friends listened in dismay as I told them what happened. They convinced me to call the police just to report it. The next evening, I got a surprising call from the officer saying 3 men were arrested trying to rob a different delivery driver at the same driveway I was lured to. The homeowner had called police when more unknown deliveries showed up at her house. Apparently, these creeps were using her isolated property to trap drivers. However, the report said one of the men escaped on foot into the woods, so they were still searching for him. I never found out if he was caught, but I was thankful I got away unharmed that night. My friends and I only worked day shifts after that, and I was always extra cautious when going to unfamiliar addresses. Story 2. It was early fall, and I was working as a cashier at a small corner store near my apartment. My shifts usually ended at 9 p.m., after which I'd spend a few hours doing food deliveries through an app before heading home. I actually enjoyed doing the deliveries at night since the roads were empty, and I'd get more orders compared to daytime, when other drivers would snatch them all up. I had just gotten off work for the night and opened up my delivery app, ready to make some extra cash. The first order only took 15 minutes. After that, I waited a few minutes before another decent one came in. The delivery was to an address 20 minutes away, with a solid payout. I headed to the fast food place, picked up the food, then started navigating to the customer's house based on the in-app map. The town I live in is pretty small, with a main center where my apartment is and most restaurants, then farmland and rural houses spreading out farther away. Most deliveries I get are to homes within town, but occasionally I'll go out to the more isolated farm areas. Given the long distance, I figured this would be a farmhouse delivery. However, the address was apparently located in a small neighborhood just off the highway on the outskirts of town, which I preferred over dark, isolated farm deliveries. I got off at the highway exit indicated and turned left down the road leading to the neighborhood. But almost immediately an unknown number called me. I declined, assuming spam, but they called right back. Figuring it was the customer, I answered. After a few silent seconds, I hung up, but they called back again. This time a male voice spoke up saying I had gone the wrong way. Confused, since the map showed I was going toward the pin, I asked what he meant. He explained the app got his address wrong, and he always had to redirect drivers. He gave me new convoluted directions involving gravel back roads to his farmhouse. I was skeptical since customers often gave me bad directions, but he seemed confident, so I turned around to follow his instructions. I passed the highway again and turned down the long gravel path he had described. The narrow dirt road stretched into dark woods, making me uneasy. I started questioning why the map would be so far off for this guy's place. But I tried to silence my doubts, assuming I was just jittery about the isolation. After several minutes with no house in sight, I considered turning around, but the tight tree lining gave me no room. I decided to continue to the end in case it was the right place, and if not, I'd call him. The path finally opened up to a small circular driveway by a house. I parked next to a for sale sign and noticed the front door was open. I saw someone wave, so I grabbed the food and headed over. Stepping inside, I spotted the man down the hall by the kitchen. He politely asked me to leave the food on the counter, then rushed off as if in a hurry. I heard the sink turn on down the hall. Warily, I went to the kitchen but found it empty, sink still running. Alarm bells rang in my head and I bolted out of there, hearing the man shouting indistinctly as I raced to my car. I didn't stop driving until I got back to my apartment lot. Checking my phone, I saw missed calls and messages from a real customer saying I'd gone to the wrong place. It hit me that the man who called hadn't been the customer at all. I had walked into a random stranger's vacant house, as I later learned. I called the police immediately to report the bizarre and terrifying encounter. They informed me my phone was likely hacked, allowing the man to track my location. To this day, the man hasn't been found. I don't know what sinister intentions he had luring me to that house, but I'm grateful I got away unharmed. Still, the chilling experience haunts me. Story 3. Delivering food was my side hustle during college. I mainly stuck to apps like DoorDash and Uber Eats, since I didn't like strangers in my car. After over a year doing this without issues besides the occasional wrong order, one night changed things. It was late Wednesday, no morning classes, so I went out to make some extra cash. I did 4 or 5 quick deliveries and ended up about 20 minutes from my dorm around 1 a.m. Figuring I should call it a night, I started heading back while leaving the app on just in case a decent order popped up nearby. A few came in, but were too far or not worth it. However, right as I pulled into the dorm parking lot, a new delivery request came in that made me pause. It was 12 miles away, but the payout was massive. Easily the highest I'd ever seen. I debated accepting since it was pretty far, but the big tip was too tempting to pass up. I took the order and headed to the restaurant. When I got there, I pulled up the order to double check what I was picking up. Oddly, the customer had only ordered 2 small items totaling just over $6. Typically, the big tips came from large, expensive orders. This meant they were just giving an unusually high tip for a small delivery. I grabbed the food and started the long drive, perplexed why someone would give such a big tip on such a small order. Was it a mistake? Or were they just trying to be extremely generous? Either way, I was happy to take it. The delivery address was in an area I hadn't been to before, gated communities and massive houses. The customer must be loaded, I realized. That explained the big tip. After driving down a long street of mansions, I was a couple minutes away when the customer texted through the app directing me to deliver to the right address. Assuming the pin was slightly off, I sent a description of the house when I arrived to confirm. The customer replied that it was wrong. I described the neighboring house, but again he said no. Now pretty annoyed, I tried calling but he declined repeatedly. I checked the address again and noticed an odd subset of numbers after the street number I'd never seen before. I searched the address in maps, which showed the pin right between 2 houses. Zooming in, I could barely make out a small garage structure. Looking up from my phone, I spotted the tiny building tucked between the main houses. No idea why someone would live there, but I had come this far already. Walking up the driveway, I saw it was basically just a large storage garage, probably for an extra car. There was no normal door, so I set the food by the garage entrance. As I pulled out my phone to take a picture, a man suddenly came around the building. He just stood there staring at me creepily. I pointed to the food and said, "It's right here, sir," as I slowly backed away. But he replied this wasn't the right spot. I asked where he wanted it delivered, getting more unsettled by this guy. He silently pointed around the back of the garage. No way was I following this weirdo anywhere. I quickly apologized, got in my car and drove off, hands shaking. The whole encounter felt very off, especially that he specifically told me not to leave it at the main house. Refusing to take it unless I followed him behind the garage was even more suspicious. I debated calling the police but wasn't sure if the guy was just eccentric and harmless. Still, it rattled me for days. I continued delivering but remained wary of strange requests. A couple weeks later, an extremely large order popped up in the same exact wealthy neighborhood. I instantly declined, unable to stop wondering about the poor driver who accepted that delivery and what met them at the drop-off.